probably is a little bit different for my generation. They probably lean toward calling, but I'm all for text messaging. It's quick, it's easy, get it out of the way.
Hi, I'm Dave Sherwood, the CEO of Bibliu. I'm here to introduce you to Campus Convos, the podcast where we discuss all things tech and education. Hope you enjoy it. Please subscribe on wherever you listen to your podcasts, and please give a share to others interested in the space.
Joining me this week to talk about the first year as president is President Bryan Newton, who's also Dr. Bryan Newton, the president of Glen Oaks Community College. And yeah, I know my team, Sam and Ginny, have been in touch and talking to you, and really excited today. The topic is first year as president. So I try to get this podcast out to people in the HE community and a number of VPAAs, CFOs, etc. Certainly looking to become presidents one day, and probably extremely curious about what that step up is like. So yeah, super interested to hear a bit more, Bryan, about how it's been. So first question I have for you today is what do you think the most exciting trends in higher ed right now?
Yeah, the exciting trends in higher ed, I think, for community colleges in particular, I think it's becoming more and more about workforce development and short-term training. And, that's really a switch for us. And it's been happening over the course of the last 2 decades. But at this point, I think students want the opportunity to get their education done quickly. And, they're choosing careers that don't necessarily involve a 2-year degree or a 4-year degree or longer. And so they know that they can make, you can make $100,000 as a welder very easily, or you can, make $80,000 as a truck driver. And so that's the type of programming that the community colleges have to provide, and we really have to respond to those needs in the community. And so that's what I've found at Glen Oaks, is that we really weren't positioned well to provide those needs. And so I'm spending time kind of ramping up our workforce development program so that we can supply what our students and what our community needs in order to be successful. I think, other trends, certainly there's a trend with mental health and the issues that causes for our students, and particularly I'm in a rural community in Michigan, and mental health is a real concern. And, technology is wonderful these days because we can address those mental health issues by having a 24/7 platform and allowing students to jump on with counselors and to talk about, whatever concerns that they have. We didn't have that, even as late as, 2021, 22. I mean, a lot of these innovations were are a direct result of COVID and the industries adjusting to the needs of colleges and students in the COVID era and beyond. And so, that's exciting. I think there's more that can be done online as we go forward to meet those basic needs of students. But that is a real concern for us. And I think finally, for us at Glen Oaks, dual enrollment is a real change in what the community college does. We're over 50% of our students are dual enrolled, meaning they're in high school while pursuing their college education. And so we have to adjust to that. And really, when we treat our students a little bit different than other colleges and universities, because they're dealing with students that are more mature, and we're dealing with students who are 15, 16 years old in a lot of respects, and so they have a little bit different expectation of how education should be delivered, and they have different needs than maybe our traditional age student, and certainly different than our non-traditional age student, which the community college also serves.
Yeah, super interesting. I hadn't thought about the counseling and mental health services that could be offered. I mean, like you say, I mean, it wasn't that long ago that people didn't really talk about this stuff very much. Like, I don't remember. I was at university over 10 years ago. I don't remember it really being promoted. I'm sure there was a counselor somewhere on campus, but it wasn't clear to me as a student that that service was available. And then now to have tech where you can just access it, I guess, from like home, like you don't even have to come in to campus is super cool, actually. And
Absolutely. And, it breaks down those stigmas, particularly
yeah,
with mental health. A student may not have wanted to approach a counselor on campus, but they're much more willing to engage with somebody online and not have to march in and, be revealed that they're seeking counseling. And so that plus, in the long run, I think it's cheaper for us to offer those services online versus in house. I mean, in house costs, we would have to pay a full time counselor to be on campus. We don't necessarily need to do that anymore. We can do that in an online environment and do it more cost effectively. And I think it's also better for the student.
no, totally. Yeah, of course, there's the cost-effective side of things, and essentially it means many more students can access, and then the convenience as well. I don't know if you know Bear Grylls, he's a British TV presenter, but he's just recently launched an app. I was at an event the other day, and he presented for men's mental health. Actually, it's called Metal, and the whole app is built around being more appealing and interesting to men. So it's like quite a masculine product,
Yeah.
and the way that they deliver the counselling as well. So that's quite interesting. It's clearly something coming to the fore. On a bit of an aside, there's obviously been huge issues with substance abuse, particularly fentanyl in the States. It's been a bit of a disaster with the pharmaceutical industry as well. Is that something you've encountered at all in any of your roles in rural communities? I know it's been a big problem throughout the States, actually.
Yeah, and it's even greater concern in the rural communities, particularly those rural communities that are close to a major thoroughfare. We have a major interstate that goes through our county, and we're positioned halfway between Chicago and Detroit, and so there are definitely concerns about substance abuse throughout our community. And again, that's one of the reasons that why if we can do that online counseling, if we can push students toward that, that helps with at least one of the barriers that we face on a regular basis. But yeah, we have encountered that, and I know just from my history, and I've always served in rural community colleges throughout my career. The substance abuse issue is a real concern, and these days with community colleges in particular, but I think also universities. When I went to school, I think you went to school and there weren't many services attached to going to school. We were very self-sufficient, I think, in how we approach college, and it's completely flipped. And so one of the responsibilities I have as president is to make sure that we break down the barriers to higher education, whatever those may be. And some are financial, some are mental health issues and substance abuse. Transportation is a huge concern in a county with no public transportation, and so we have to find ways to address those issues and to pay for those issues, which I think is the larger concern with a rural community college that has a very limited budget.
Yeah, must be a great challenge for the communities. Are you seeing things improve? From my very loose understanding of the fentanyl crisis, it was sort of at its worst a few years ago, but I don't know if that's true, like specifically where you are, or maybe even true in general, or true in other communities you've lived in the past.
Yeah, it's maybe not as much of a crisis as it was. I remember at my last college, it had got to the point where the governor had appointed opioid commissions in each county to address the health crisis that was happening. I think those days are gone, but it's still a major concern. And like I said, I think anytime that you are positioned closely to a major transportation hub, which we are, I think that just increases the likelihood of fentanyl and other things, sex trafficking, et cetera, as being concerns because it's easy for the producers of those things to get the product to us in a rural county.
Yeah, been a really sad thing, but positive things are sort of moving in a bit of a better direction. That's for sure. And yeah, I mean, if we jump to a different topic, it'd be helpful to understand a bit more about what it's like in the first year of presidency. Has it been different to what you'd expected? What are the key challenges, and what are the key things that have excited you and surprised you in, I guess, both the positive and negative sense?
Yeah, I had a lot of preparation for the presidency, and I had a great mentor at my last job as vice president at Warwick Community College in Maryland, and he really, took me on as a project, if you will, and every day he was giving me some advice as to what I would encounter when I eventually became president. And so that helped me tremendously. And so I was prepared for the job when I came in. I think, some things that you're not prepared for. I wasn't prepared for the pace of things and just how physically and mentally exhausting it is, and in particular in those first couple months. I mean, you are running from sun up to sundown. It's and you don't really have control of your calendar anymore. You really kind of give that up to others, and you go from meeting to meeting, and often are saying the same things that you said in the afternoon meeting versus saying in the morning meeting, and so. That is all different than being a vice president, because I think when you're a vice president, and my experience was at least, you have a very specific window of things that you are operating in. And so I was vice president of enrollment and student services at 3 different colleges before becoming president here. And so I was very tuned into enrollment and student services, and I had projects that I had to work on. And the presidency is totally different. The presidency is more about community. It's about cheerleading. It's about representing the school well, and getting out in the community in particular. And, that is different than the role of a vice president. So I would say to folks that are considering this position, if you don't like that networking, the schmoozing, being out in the community and talking to people, and you just want to sit in your office and micromanage the employees that you have, as a president, that's not going to work. You have to be open. You have to listen, and listening is actually very exhausting. Sometimes it's more exhausting than talking. And so, I think that's been my experience, but it's been a great experience. And I think I was made for the role in many ways. Growing up, I wanted to be a politician, and all those things that come with politics and giving speeches and meeting people. And in many ways, that's what the modern presidency is about. And I have to hire good people on my team as vice presidents, and they really have to run the day-to-day of the college, and I have to trust them to do that. And sometimes it's you often feel like you're the last to know some things, and that can be frustrating. But I think it's for the good, because those folks who are your vice presidents have to deal with issues and have to deal with them right away, and you have to trust that they're going to do that.
I've found the same as we've grown. We started with 3 people, myself and co-founders, and now we're 250. So much is about bringing in great people, like you say, great leaders around you. I always say, better than me at doing their their portfolio. So like a
They are, yeah.
better engineering lead. I was never an engineer. Better operations. I was also never opsy. But yeah, totally that. I think that's such a key point. Yeah, and it's a funny one too. People often look, oh, you're a CEO or you're a college president. That must be awesome. You have so much power. You can do so much. But the reality is, a lot of what we do, like you say, is politics, where essentially, we've got quite limited set of resources. We've got conflicting stakeholders who want quite different things, and we've got to do our best to empower and keep our stakeholders happy, but also move the organization in a direction that's for the better, improving things for our users and customers, students, of course, improving the financial outlook, growing all of these things. So it's quite a tricky job. And I think the sort of power we have is somewhat overstated, because a lot of the time we're brokering compromises and having difficult conversations and disappointing people.
That's right.
We can only give them 60% of what they like, right? But I'm interested to dig into the politics point a bit more. Is your board elected? Do you have any independent board members who are not elected? Have the Democratic sort of Republican politics impacted the college directly very much?
No, we do have elected board members, and so we have 7 elected board members. That was new for me because I had come from colleges where the governor appointed those board members, and often they served for very long terms. Here, they're 6-year terms, and then they have to run again. And it's actually a little bit surprising that even though they have to run on the ballot, they don't get it. We don't get into Democratic and Republican politics, so they're not labeled as either one party or another when they're elected, but they are on the larger general election ballot. And I found all my members. I don't even know what the political parties of some of my board members are, and I don't ask, and also I don't tell what my politics are, and that's very difficult for me because I have certain opinions, and I have to zip my lips and move on with things, because you never know who you're talking to and what political party they are, and so I do my best to stay very neutral, and I think my board of directors does that as well very effectively. But it's a challenge sometimes, because, and particularly in this tumultuous political environment, you want to jump in, you want to say things, and we do have to say things as president sometimes. I mean, there's certain things that we have to take a stance on, regardless of political party and regardless of the politician who is maybe making statements or saying things that are contrary to our mission and vision. But for the most part, staying politically neutral is part of the game. Yeah.
Yeah, I imagine it's can be tricky at times. I remember sort of 2020, there were lots of employees wanting us to make various political statements, and it is difficult balancing things. But ultimately, we got to a point where we were like, look, we have partners who are in, on the left wing and the right wing in terms of the students that are in that community. Some very, strongly supportive of various political parties. And ultimately, our job as a software ed tech is to support everyone, all students, not pick one camp over the other, or try to make an ed tech software political in some way. And it can be quite tricky. And I'm a political party member myself, but also try to keep things quiet and separate from the business. I feel passionate about issues, but it's a personal matter, not a work one for me.
Yeah, I'm thinking back, and one of the things I learned from my prior president, it was the value of staying neutral. And, he had an agreement with his board of directors that he wouldn't go to fundraisers for one political candidate or another, that, they voted to ban that at his request. And, that was something that was helpful. And, in terms of political statements, and particularly particularly in these last 4 or 5 years, there were times when, you really wanted to make a political statement to your students and to your employees, if just to comfort them nonetheless. But I know that, my former president got in a little bit of trouble for that, with his board making a statement which I thought was very, very neutral and really didn't touch upon any sensitive issues. But because of the politically charged times that we have in the U.S., he was, chastised for that by a board member or two. So I learned from all that, and so I don't make political statements, even when I feel I should. I just don't, and it takes a little bit of restraint to do that. And I'm sure it's the same way in your business. You're doing sales, you're talking to customers, and you have to not side with one philosophy or another. So,
do you also interface much with the state house or Congress? I assume they come to visit the college sometimes and things like that. How do those relationships work? And do you find those relationships can be helpful in terms of bringing, attention, funding, these types of things as well? So on one hand, like you have to try to be neutral. On the other hand, you have to try and work with the people that have been elected as well, right? So it's interesting.
right.
And the governor, of course.
Yeah, that's the tricky part, and we work both with our state leaders in Lansing, as well as our federal representatives, and things going on in Washington, and particularly in this year, there's been a lot happening with our Washington-based politicians. So we've been in contact with them, but our relationship is more with our state legislators, our state representative in our county, and our state senator. And, we're in a very conservative rural county, and so we know that they have a political philosophy. And again, this is where being neutral, I think, is very helpful, because you don't want to get into a conversation about politics with those folks. And, they have very, very strong views to one side about what should happen. And so I keep the conversation, when I'm sitting down with our state legislators and state representative, I keep it focused on what the community college does, particularly workforce development, because I think that is something that everybody can get behind, and they know there's a great need for us to develop jobs, to develop the economy here in St. Joseph County. And so I try to keep the conversation narrow on those issues, and I don't get into social issues and those type of things that are more controversial. And I know that's a struggle. I think when those politicians come to visit, I know we've got some members of our community who are very much the opposite political stripe, and they kind of grit their teeth. And as the politicians walk by or walk through the college. But again, I don't announce whether I'm a Republican or Democrat, and I think that really kind of helps the college as a whole. And ultimately, my responsibility and my job is to promote the mission of the college and not promote one ideology or another.
Totally. I'm also curious to ask a bit about how I believe it was in the reconciliation bill, but there's a movement, and I know it hasn't passed the Senate yet, and I guess it'll have to go back to the House as well. But assuming sort of passes as stands, and funding is being diverted away from programs that are deemed to have lower graduate salaries versus cost of program, is that going to impact you guys much at all, do you think?
Yeah, there's a lot of impacts in the reconciliation bill that's moving forward in Washington, as well as the fiscal year budget bill. And those are two separate bills that are moving forward. But I think, we were really panicked about a month ago because of the proposals that passed in the House of Representatives, and particularly the risk sharing proposal that would, essentially would have had us us colleges pay for students who defaulted on their loans, even though we have no control over that behavior by the student. They were going to have a risk sharing agreement, and we would have to participate in that. That was concerning for community colleges, obviously, because, particularly for rural community colleges that have a small budget like we do. Also, they had made some changes to the Pell Grant program initially, and it was really going to impact part-time students, essentially students who were below six credits would not be eligible for Pell Grants. And so many of our students are part-time. Not as many here at Glen Oaks because we have full-time athletics and those type of things. But, I know some community colleges, particularly the community college that I came from, 85% of their students were part-time. And so, the funding mechanism changing potentially means that you would have a loss of students come the next year. Fortunately, the Senate changed that and kind of cut those portions out of the bill. And so we kind of feel a little bit better of that. It still has to go to conference committee and those type of things, but I think we're a little bit more secure in that. The budget bill is concerning for next year. It cuts some valuable resources that serve our students, particularly the TRIO programs, which, at community colleges, they provide support for students, particularly low-income students, students of color, et cetera. And if those programs go away, it's going to be tough to fill that void, particularly, again, in a very tight budget, which we have in rural community colleges. And so we get our funding from various sources. We don't really get much direct funding from the federal government, but we do get the funding that comes in the form of them paying for federal student aid. And so, you have to balance both the federal and the legislative, because the legislative, we get a portion of our budget from state appropriations. And so it's always a balancing act. You always have to keep in touch with your legislators, whether you like them or not. It's one of the roles of being a president. And you just, and I think that can be hard for some people, keeping their personal opinions outside of what's best for the college. And, I would just advise anybody who is thinking about becoming president that, that is one of the things that you just have to do. You have to stay neutral. You have to not show your cards whatsoever. And, once you're retired, you can go and do whatever you want to. But in this job, it's just not possible.
Of course, yeah, no, that makes sense. It looks like a lot of change coming, and like you say, potentially significant cuts to certain programs could obviously hit particular communities particularly hard. Yeah, and I quite like the concept of trying to set the focus on programs that will create higher paid jobs, but it's so tricky to do in practice without making mistakes. Like you think of like nursing, for instance, it's quite an expensive technical program to run. Right. And then maybe the salary ratio isn't quite right for however they've planned it, but it's a critical role for a society and a great productive job. So I like the concept of trying to make the courses more aligned to skills and productivity, but in practice it could be really difficult. There could be a lot of mistakes and damage done to good programs.
One of our missions is to serve community needs, and the community needs healthcare workers, and we don't make any money on the nursing program. We never have. That is an expensive program to run, but it's critical to our local hospitals and healthcare facilities that we produce those nurses on an annual basis, and so that's what we do. There's some programs that we would like to offer, but the wages are just so low that it doesn't make it possible. For instance, early childcare. We have a huge need in our rural community for childcare workers, but the childhood salaries are so low that, we can't produce a program that produces graduates who are making minimum wage. That's just not, what we are built for in our mission and vision. And so it's a balance between meeting community needs, but also knowing when you just can't do it because you're not producing students who are ready for work and ready for the modern economy. And we just can't justifiably do that for early childhood or hospitality or several other really, really important needs that we have in our community.
I didn't realize that actually. And yeah, I mean, I've got a 2-year-old and early childhood's a big problem here as well in terms of, like you say, staffing, just not enough centers offering, we call it nursery, but yeah, no, I hadn't thought of that it is basically impossible to run a program. That's a real shame because, educating and looking after our little ones is critical for society. So, and there's also, of course, going to be programs that, a bit more theoretical or artistic, and everyone knows they don't pay great, but they can be important to society. So I like the general concept, more people, more skilled people, coming into like tech, highly productive jobs. It's good for society to have more people on higher salaries. But if we're losing too many other critical roles that don't kind of tax, then it probably overall won't be a good thing. So it's sort of the devil's in the detail, really, I think, on that one.
Yeah, and for community colleges in particular, I mean, our role is either to put students in jobs when they leave the college or to get them to transfer to the university. And, that is something that we have taken on. It's called Community College 3.0. It's a mission of ours. It's built on a philosophy that was developed by the Aspen Institute, but we very much believe in that. And, it's so sad when I go out in the community and, maybe I'll stop in at a fast food restaurant and I'm talking to the person who's ringing up my order, and they say they're a graduate of Glen Oaks Community College. And I'm thinking to myself, you didn't go to the community college to be a server in, the coffee shop. And so what happened? And so we have to make it our mission, not only to graduate people or to transfer them, but also to make sure that they get a job after they leave the community college. And that is a relatively new mission for us in community colleges. We were all about enrollment many, many years ago when I first started. We kind of graduated up from that and we became more about enrollment and completion. And now we're kind of post-completion, making sure that our students get those jobs or that they're securely in their bachelor's degree. And that is our mission. So we are going to have to hire more career service professionals to help with that. We're going to have to make sure that they're placed in the right degree or certificate or short-term training from the very beginning, so they're not wasting their time and dollars on something that in the end is going to have them working at the local coffee shop.
Exactly. Yeah, no, it's interesting. Also, that I think there's a bit of a misnomer in higher ed. People feel, everything's gotten really expensive in terms of tuition, but all the community colleges I know we partner with, it's incredibly cheap, frankly. And I know, it's subsidized locally and stuff, but I think a lot of the average person maybe doesn't quite realize how good value community college is.
That's right.
And they're probably thinking of like one or two, extremely expensive private schools that's where they kind of get their reference point from, like the more famous schools. Well, really, really appreciate having you on today, President Newton. I know we've sort of gone on to some different topics, but I like to talk about a lot of the current issues of the time and things that are on people's mind in ed tech and people in higher ed, of course, as well. So really appreciate it. I'll wrap it up there, and obviously really thank you to everyone for listening. And do make sure that you share the podcast, subscribe on YouTube, Spotify, wherever you're listening to this, and we'll see you next time.
Thank you.